Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Immigration Fridays. I'm your host, Prashanthi Reddy, and I'm thrilled to have you join us as we discuss the latest in US immigration law. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic that's maybe important to you, especially filing a H-1B extension, and if you're presently on a H-1 and your H-1 is expiring. So that's what we're going to be talking about. H-1B extensions and how to file them and tips. So generally speaking, USCIS grants a maximum of 6 years H-1B. So at a time, they grant you 3 years at a time. So after the end of your 3 years period, you'll have to file another extension for 3 years. The way to see if your H-1 is expiring is by looking at your I-94 form. The I-94 form will have a start date and an end date. So make sure you're aware of what your I-94 says. Generally, as I said, a H-1B is granted for 6 years, but there are some exceptions to that. If you have an I-140 approved under the EB1, EB2, or EB3 category, then your H-1B may be granted for beyond 6 years. So if you have an I-140 approved, you will keep getting 3 years of extension on your H-1 until your priority date is available and you're able to file adjustment of status. You can also get an extension beyond 6 years on your H-1 if you have a labor cert that is presently pending for over 365 days. But in that case, you don't get a H-1 for 3 years, you get a H-1 only for 1 year, and you keep getting extensions for 1 year. So once we've determined that it's the right time for you to file your H-1B petition, we have to go a little bit into the process and see how the H-1B petition has to be filed. So you have to know a little bit about the process. First, it's important to know that the H-1B petition is solely filed by your employer. So if you're an employer, it's your responsibility to file the H-1B petition. The employee will provide you with all the documentation needed. And you start by filing an LCA, or labor condition application, which is filed with the Labor Department. Once the LCA is approved, then you have to file an I-129 petition, which is filed with USCIS. The second point to be aware of is the criteria for a H-1B approval. The criteria remains the same as when you filed your previous H-1, but of course with an added criteria. That is, you presently have to be on a H-1 for an extension, and you should be on a valid H-1 and be in status. When I say you have to be in status, it means that your I-94 should not have expired, and also you should presently be working and have pay stubs from your employer to show that you're working. So you have to be in valid H-1B status to file a H-1 extension, and the employer should continue to have speciality occupation work available for you. So the job should continue to be available. The employer should be able to show that they have enough specialty occupation work for you to be able to file an extension. Now let's talk a little bit about the processing time. The processing for a H-1B petition usually takes about 4 to 6 months. It is possible to get a H-1B faster by applying in premium processing. In order to file for a premium processing application, you have to pay an extra of $2,085, and USCIS will respond to your case and process it in 30 days. Though usually it doesn't take more than a week. This response could be either an approval or it could be a request for further evidence. If you get an RFE, then there is a date within which you have to respond to the RFE with the documents asked. So another thing to keep in mind after the time period is, how does the new H-1B regulation change the way H-1B extensions are filed? So let's talk a little bit about the new H-1B regulation. The new H-1B regulation took effect on January 17th, 2025. And while it's same as the previous it's the same way of filing H-1s. There's some key changes. One is and most importantly, is the specialty occupation work depends on the end client. So that means if you're working for a consulting company and you're working at an end client site, so it's important that you find out what are the requirements at the end client site rather than at your employer site for doing that particular job. So if the end client requires a bachelor's degree in computer science for performing that job, then it is a specialty occupation. Otherwise, it isn't, even if your employer requires a bachelor's degree. So the criteria is defined by the end client. And this, of course, is only in scenarios where you're working for an end client. Maintenance of status is, of course, key. And USCIS has said that they will now be requesting maintenance of status documents in all cases. So usually it would make sense to submit all your maintenance of status documents, proof of maintenance of status documents with the H-1B petition rather than waiting for an RFE. Those documents are usually pay stubs to show that you're presently working, your I-94, your I-797 H-1B approval, and they must be still valid, not expired. And USCIS can also ask for work schedules, and they can ask for proof of the work that you do. So examples of your work. So it would make sense to submit all those documents in the initial stages. And of course, availability of specialty work is now required by regulation. They put it in the regulation. So what does that mean? That means that your employer should show that that they have specialty occupation work available for you, that there is a need to hire you. Again, if it's a consulting company type scenario where there's an end client, then they need a purchase order and a contract with the end client. If you're working in-house, then they would most probably need to show volume of business and contracts maybe with their clients to show that there is sufficient requirement for you to be working for another 3 years. Another key change with the new H-1B regulation is self-sponsorship. It's now possible to file your own H-1 provided you have a board of directors or maybe another partner who is able to sign off on the petition and it has more than 50% stake would be good. Now let's talk a little bit about the tips to navigate successfully a H-1B extension. Number one, start early. Don't wait until the last minute. Know that it takes 4 to 6 months to file a H-1, so start as early as possible. Of course, you can't file earlier than 6 months, and make sure you have all the documentation. You have enough time to gather the documents that we just mentioned. Maintain your status, maintain your documentation, and submit all the proper documentation such as your degree certificates, your I-94, your passport, all your H-1B approvals, and all other immigration related documents. Communication with your employer is key. So make sure that you have clear and consistent communication with your employer and with their legal team. And same thing, if you're an employer, you have to communicate with your employee to make sure you know what the job description is, especially if they're working at an end client, what their residence is, if they've changed work locations, especially if they're working remotely, sometimes they might change addresses and they might not inform you. So very important to make sure you have all the updated information. Understand and articulate your job duties properly. That's the next step. Articulation of your job duties, meanings writing your job duties clearly to show that at least a bachelor's degree is in a specific field is required for the job. So show the complexity of your job. Stay informed about your wage levels. When you're filing an extension, it's possible that the prevailing wage levels might have increased because now you're looking at a new wage level. Every year the wage levels change. So it's possible that your employer might have to pay you a higher wage. Prepare for potential RFEs. If you receive an RFE, respond thoroughly, respond within the time frame given, take legal help, and make sure you read the RFE carefully. Next point, consider premium processing. It's always good to get a response early so that you can plan better. And even if there's a denial, then you have enough time to plan If you get a denial before the expiry of your I-94, you can actually file it again. But if you're filing in the last minute, and that's another reason to file early and file in premium processing, if you're filing in the last minute, you might get a denial after the expiry of your I-94, and then there's nothing much you can do. Again, last but not the least, take legal counsel. By following these steps and staying informed, you can significantly increase your chances of an approval of your H-1B extension. We know you might have questions, and I hope you found this presentation useful. So please feel free to leave questions in the comments section of the video. Thank you so much for listening, for tuning into this session, to our new session of Immigration Fridays. Remember, staying informed and being prepared is the best tool to navigating your immigration process. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care.